Dr. Qamaruzzaman sahab, thank you very much for granting this interview to CDKN, Lead Pakistan and Politics and Development magazine. My first question is that you just attended the Cancun conference. How do you rate the outcome of the conference?
In fact, the outcome of this Cancun Climate Change Conference, this is quite an encouraging outcome. Although most of the things which were agreed upon by some of the countries in Copenhagen has been taken care during this Cancun conference. And it is encouraging because this was very important for the whole process of this climate change. If this outcome has not been agreed, then this whole process could have been, I think, may have come to a standstill, and the people's confidence on this UNFCCC this process may have been damaged. So in that way, this is very encouraging that most of the things have been agreed in the Cancun conference, but because most of the developing countries, they were in fact trying to push the Kyoto Protocol process. But the developed countries, and especially the government of Japan and Russia, they were not favoring this Kyoto Protocol to be extended after 2012. So, and to some extent, you can say that they have become successful in putting aside this Kyoto Protocol extension after 2012 in the Cancun, although there is still a provision for the developing countries to push for the Kyoto Protocol. But I think the chances of that probably looks, to me at least, believe, for the extension of the Kyoto Protocol in the next COP.
Do you think that Kyoto will hit some success after 2 years?
I think I have my doubts about the extension of Kyoto Protocol after 2012, especially this government of Japan have come out very openly against the extension of this, because they are, I think, to some extent, if we look at honestly, their stand is not that, I think, unfair also, because they are demanding that in the principle of Annex 1 countries, the developed countries, they have the responsibility. But some of the developed countries, which is led by the Japanese, they are in fact trying to push forward the idea that this is Kyoto Protocol is not that fair, because this emerging economies, which I think they are in fact pointing towards China and India, Brazil and South Africa, that they don't have, in the Kyoto Protocol, they don't have the binding restriction on them.
Sir, you attended the Cancun conference. What were Pakistan's major concern at the conference?
In fact, first of all, if we look at the outcomes and the importance of this, the important decisions taken in the climate conference, the most important, I think, is that first of all is that the process is likely to continue, because all the countries agree to the text of this declaration. And the important point as far as the developing countries are concerned is this global climate fund. The developed countries have agreed that they will increase and they make available this climate fund of $100 billion by 2020, starting from next year $30 billion, and then they will beef up this global climate fund to $100 billion by 2020 for this helping these developing countries for the adaptation and mitigation efforts. So this is the, I think, most important part of this as far as the developing countries are concerned. Then there are other part is that they are agreed mostly to set up this technology mechanism, technology transfer mechanism. And under that there will be this technology executive committee, and then the technical committee of this technology transfer, technical committee. So which will suggest. So as far as Pakistan is concerned, what we were trying to do to achieve in Copenhagen as well as in Cancun was to highlight our vulnerabilities to climate change.
What are those?
Pakistan's vulnerability to climate change is, I think, abundantly clear after recent devastating floods in Pakistan.
Mhm.
So the extreme weather events are on the rise.
Mhm.
So these are likely to cause, I think, a lot of difficulties for Pakistan. And the second most important part, besides extreme weather events, is this projected recession of the glaciers in northern Pakistan. So these are, I think, most of the water in Indus is coming from the glaciers and the snow melt.
You just talked about glaciers. Do you think that India and Pakistan are the worst victim of that? Their Himalayan glacier is melting. What the two countries are doing to slow down this process? Are they doing anything?
In fact, unfortunately, not, because
Both are only.
both are, I think, to some extent, are not doing much for that. And in fact, as far as the mitigation efforts are concerned, Pakistan cannot do much in mitigation as far as the carbon emissions are concerned, because our emissions are, I think, one of the lowest emissions per capita in the country. But India is, I think, their emissions are rising very rapidly. And I think it is important for Pakistan at least that the neighboring countries emissions, and then the direct carbon source from their neighboring countries, transboundary this pollution and carbon source, they are also, besides this global warming, rise of temperatures are impacting the glaciers, but besides that, there is another important factor is the transboundary pollutions. Carbon sources are directly depositing on the Himalayan glaciers, which are likely to be affected by these carbon deposits on the surface of these glaciers. So these two impacts probably are likely to cause this.
So Pakistan is doing nothing at all to slow down the process of melting.
No, that's not very true, because Pakistan, in fact, cannot do much alone.
Why? Like, is there no capacity to that?
No, not because this is a global phenomenon. So this carbon emissions and carbon sources are not generated by Pakistan himself. So our efforts, especially in the mitigation of carbon emissions, which are causing the global warming and these carbon source deposits, these are not because of the acts of the Pakistan. So that's why I am saying that we cannot do, because these are not being caused by our actions.
Do you see any possibility whereby two countries could work together, Pakistan and India, to address the issues of melting glaciers?
Yeah, in fact.
What are those areas where the two countries could work together?
In fact, during the last SARC summit, it has already been agreed at the highest level of the SARC countries that we will have a cooperative research and other undertakings as far as the climate change is concerned, especially the glaciers, monitoring their, if there is a possibility of depletion, how it can be. And so first of all, it is important that we should have the mechanism to monitor their health of these glaciers. So, and then we can say that these are being impacted, or how much they are being impacted.
Were you satisfied with the composition of Pakistani delegation at Cancun? There is a lot of criticism that the delegation had so many irrelevant people and it was not a professional delegation.
No, I don't agree with this. In fact, I think that Pakistani delegations, maybe few people may not, if they may not have been there, it may not have been making much difference. But otherwise, I think the Pakistani delegations had the experts from all the fields. They were from the climate side, from technology side, from finance side, from All others, I think.
There was a criticism that Pakistan did not represent itself in all the side meetings that were taking place concurrently.
I think we have, as far as my knowledge is concerned, we have attended most of this side meetings.
There was another criticism that Pakistan could have highlighted the floods and flood could not be highlighted
in fact,
successfully.
that was the only success that which Pakistan have achieved in the Cancun. That is the highlighting of this our floods, and it has been acknowledged in all the important these statements of the country statements, starting from the President of Mexico in the opening speech, in the Secretary General of United Nations when he addressed. He very clearly mentioned the impact, this vulnerability, and especially the recent floods or devastating floods of Pakistan.
Then Pakistan should have been included in the list of most vulnerable countries, but it is not.
In fact, the recent
No, we are not treated as the most vulnerable countries, one of the most vulnerable countries as far as.
No, we are. Although we are not in the, there are many other different categories.
We don't qualify that criteria.
We qualify for the most.
But we are not.
Country.
We are not to the best of my knowledge.
Because we are on the list, on the countries list, we are on the 16th on the most vulnerable countries in the global, in 108, more than 180 countries. We are at the number 16 by some of the recent studies which have been presented over there in this Cancun.
Your colleague Dr. Aurangzeb Khan yesterday told me that we were not.
No, I think he may have some.
So you're sure that Pakistan is in the list of.
In fact, there are many other categories like SIDS, small island countries. Then there are some least developed countries. Then there are some, but we are part of this most vulnerable countries.
Dr. Qamar, what has been your personal contribution at Cancun?
In fact, I attended most of this technology transfer meetings. I was assigned that I should be following that. And in fact, that was the only area which achieves a good success, and they have been, with the global consensus, the technical executive committee has been established, and then the technology transfer technical committee has been agreed upon to be established. So hopefully during the next 12 months, the countries are going to propose their nominations for the executive committee, and then this technical professional committee will also be established within the next 12 months, which will be presented for approval in the next COP conference.
What are is Pakistan thinking on alternative sources of energy, alternative sources of water?
Yeah, that is very important. Although we should have moved much faster on these areas, and as far as the
suppose if the Himalayan glaciers have melt out, then what will we do after that?
In fact, that I am trying to emphasize that first you have asked about the renewable energies. In fact, the Met Department identified after a detailed, extensive study undertaken for the coastal areas of the country, identified the wind corridor of Ghar, which is called the Gharo wind corridor, and the total potential of that area has been identified as 11,000 megawatt. And after that study, I think country should have by now this installation of this wind farm powerhouses, but I think this progress on these is not that encouraging right up to now. But hopefully in the next few years we should have much progress on this front. And as far as the water resources are concerned, water resources we have identified a number of options for that. And in fact, we are preparing a national climate change policy also. That also includes some of the measures which are required. We need to, first of all, the most important and first step is the conservation of water. So that I think